Good evening and welcome to a special presentation of the Campus Weather Service. This is your live broadcast team. We are covering Hurricane Helene, which is about to make landfall in Florida. I'm student meteorologist Filippo Formica, joined here with Matthew Howard. We're talking about a rapidly intensifying storm making its way to the panhandle of Florida, where we could see devastating effects in the Big Bend, as well as heavy rainfall that's currently ongoing and is expected to continue in North Carolina. First, we're going to throw it over to Tyler Hughes at the wall with more information.
Thank you, Filippo and Matthew. And yes, this is the latest advisory that we have in from the National Hurricane Center. And this is the satellite image of Hurricane Helene, a very large hurricane as far as hurricanes go. As a matter of fact, hurricane force winds now extend over 60 miles out from the center eye of Helene. At last check, it had sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. That puts Helene at a Category 4 storm. It was a Category 2 when we woke up this morning, so rapid intensification has been ongoing over the last few hours with a central pressure now of 945 millibars, and even more recent Hurricane Hunter observations have indicated that continues to drop. So Helene is feeding off of very warm Gulf waters right now and continuing to strengthen as it approaches the Big Bend area of Florida. This is the latest radar look we have, and you can see heavy bands of rainfall inside the eye wall here. Also have reports that lightning has been intensifying inside the eye wall over the last few hours. And when lightning intensifies inside the eye wall of a hurricane, that's a sign that the storm is going to continue to strengthen. But you can also see heavy rain bands right now over Panama City, Tampa Bay as well. So just because the storm hasn't made landfall yet and isn't expected to make landfall for the next few hours, that does not mean impacts are not ongoing, because they are ongoing across portions of the Gulf Coast of Florida and up to the Panhandle as far west as Panama City and even further than that as well. Helene expected to make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane later on this evening in the Big Bend area of Florida, and will still be a Category 2 hurricane overnight tonight by the time the center of circulation makes it to Georgia. However, we know that impacts can be felt far beyond this cone of uncertainty here, and so that's why we have hurricane warnings posted for the Big Bend region of Florida all the way up through central Georgia, and we have tropical storm warnings posted as well for the entire Florida peninsula, for the entire state of South Carolina, for the entire state of Georgia that's not currently under a hurricane warning, and the tropical storm warnings even extend into portions of North Carolina and Tennessee. So we are expecting tropical storm force winds to reach as far north as North Carolina and Tennessee, and that will not be a good situation, especially when you combine with all the rainfall. In addition, we're also watching a storm surge threat. The National Hurricane Center called the storm surge threat along the Big Bend of Florida earlier today catastrophic, potentially catastrophic, and potentially deadly, with storm surge of up to 20 feet possible in some areas. There are only 2 hurricanes that have ever had storm surge of 20 feet, and those are Ike and that's Katrina. And so this storm is packing a punch in terms of storm surge, and so storm surge warnings now in effect for pretty much the entire Gulf Coast of Florida. We will continue to monitor those storm surge warnings over the course of the evening this evening. Wind gusts will continue to be an issue overnight tonight as the eye wall makes landfall here. Don't pay attention to these plots here of 85 miles per hour in Lake City, because we know that locally there will be higher amounts of wind gusts throughout as the storm makes landfall. 100 miles per hour or more wind gusts, those are not out of the question as this hurricane makes landfall in the Big Bend region of Florida and begins to work its way northward. And so wind gusts are also something that we're very much concerned about over the course of the night tonight. The rainfall outlook is something we're also extremely concerned about. More than 3 inches, well, more than 2 inches to go in Tallahassee, and I think that number is even a little conservative, but already they've seen multiple inches of rainfall, and this is expected to continue northward here. Where you see the yellows, this is locally 8 to 10 inches or more of rainfall expected in some parts of the Smoky Mountains, and so that could lead to a catastrophic flash flooding situation there, a situation that is also not good at all, considering they've already had multiple inches of rain over the past few days as well. So for that reason, the largest high-risk excessive rainfall outlook that I've seen is in effect for today, extending all the way from Florida up to North Carolina, and we expect this region to remain in a high excessive rainfall outlook over the course of the day tomorrow as well. Not out of the question here as well as a tornado threat, especially tomorrow. A 10% risk for tornadoes within a certain area of North Carolina, portions of South Carolina as well. And so the tornado threat continues tomorrow. That's something that we do have to be aware of as we head through. So I'm going to send it back to the desk, Matthew and Filippo, and they're going to talk a little bit about some safety tips that you need to know, especially if you are in the path of a hurricane.
Thanks, Tyler. One thing we talk about every single time there's a hurricane making landfall is what you can do to stay safe. The last thing we want to happen is for anyone to die due to a weather-related event. So here's a few tips if you are staying at home and you have not evacuated, although there were evacuation orders posted in Florida. Some people do decide to stay home. So do not operate a generator indoors. Gas engines will produce carbon monoxide, and just like running your car inside of a closed garage door, it will potentially kill you. Stay in an interior room. Just like a tornado, you want to stay away from anything that could break into your home, such as glass, doors, anything where debris can penetrate the walls.
And never climb to a level without windows. Honestly, without windows, it is really, really critical, and it's going to be a catastrophic ongoing situation as we get throughout the next couple hours, especially as this hurricane makes landfall. And pay attention to weather news and updates. There are going to be widespread power outages with this hurricane, so keeping a backup radio will be absolutely critical when assessing this storm. Listening to local weather updates, especially since this hurricane is going to impact a large area outside of the cone. Even effects being felt in the Carolinas, and even possibly wind gusts strong in eastern Florida too. So it's going to be a large storm with a lot of impacts, including heavy rain and damaging winds, even felt well inland.
That's right, Matthew. That's one of the things about this storm that is so much different than many other hurricanes. We're not just talking about the hurricane effects. We're also talking about flash flooding. We're talking about storm surge. We're talking about tornadoes. All these threats are currently ongoing in the southeast. So any of the tips that you've gotten about flash flooding, make sure you get to a high level, especially we've been talking about in North Carolina, where we have seen over a half a foot of rainfall, and we could see another half a foot of rainfall before it's all said and done. Make sure to stay safe there. Do not drive your car through any flood inundated waters as well. Tornado safety, very similar. Stay inside into an interior room. Make sure to have any weather radios. Make sure they have batteries, just like your smoke detector. Make sure they have current batteries. But with that, we're going to send it back to Tyler to talk about some of the effects that a high-intensity hurricane like this can have.
Thank you, Filippo. And you know, we talk a lot about different categories of hurricanes and the impacts, right, that they may have on the area. And right now my graphic is not advancing, but if it were, you'd be able to see that we have different categories of hurricanes. The Category 1, the lowest level, we're concerned about wind damage, and I will try to pull that up for you here in just a moment, but you can see that we're concerned about winds here. These palm trees in our shot, they'll start to be blowing over a little bit, and it certainly does not become a good situation, even in a Category 1 hurricane. Another thing we're concerned about as well is storm surge. Category 1, relatively minimal damage, especially for areas that are well prepared, but with wind gusts of 74 to 95 miles an hour, it can still do some damage. As we get up toward a Category 2 hurricane, now that things are working a little bit, 96 to 110 miles per hour. Now you can see we're starting to see some leaves blowing off some of the trees. The house here starting to receive a little bit of damage, maybe some storm surge inundation. Now a Category 3 hurricane. Trees could be blown over, especially when we receive lots of rainfall. Notice that the ground becomes really saturated, and that enables trees to basically be uprooted and knocked over easier. And so Category 3 hurricane winds up to 129 miles per hour, sustained winds within the eye. That's when we begin to see these type of damage effects like you're seeing on these trees and this house here in front of you. Then as we get toward a Category 4 hurricane, things start to get a lot more dangerous. Catastrophic damage, sustained winds up to 156 miles per hour. You can see the house here lost the shingles off its roof, and it could even be worse than that in some situations. These trees are toppled over now, And this is not a good situation for our folks, our friends in this house here. Also quite a bit of storm surge. You saw the water rising up on our friends in this hypothetical house here. And of course, we don't expect the storm to strengthen to a Category 5, but Category 5 hurricane strength is catastrophic. And at that point, you see houses that have really catastrophic damage. So with that, I'll send it back to Filippo and Matthew.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, those impacts are absolutely devastating, and our hearts are with the people of Florida right now as they're having to deal with this storm. No one should have to deal with the potential impacts of a hurricane. But with that, from myself, from Matthew, and Tyler, we're going to take a brief break. Stay tuned here for more.
Thank you so much for tuning back in. I'm student meteorologist Gavin Sandell, joined here with Chandler Pruitt, current grad student for Penn State University and used to attend Florida State. We are currently going to interview a grad student at Florida State University. His name is Ryan Cedergren. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to extend my thanks again for really doing this in a crazy situation in Tallahassee. I know things are going crazy down there. Tell me exactly what is going on right now.
So right now it's kind of calm and quiet. We've had a lot of rain today. It's been raining, I think, since the moment I woke up to now. But I think, the worst of it's still probably about an hour or two away. I think for now it's just kind of starting to ramp up.
Fair enough. So we can only say so much from the studios here. Take us exactly what's going on outside. You said it was calm in the morning, but now it's starting to ramp up. Are the trees flying or branches coming down? What exactly is going on?
I haven't seen any branches or anything come down quite yet. I've just seen like a lot of rain. We're pretty hilly in Tallahassee and we don't have great drainage. So there's been some localized ponding and possibly some flooding. Um, but like the trees have just kind of been going a little bit back and forth, but nothing super crazy quite yet. I think our max gust has been like 20 miles per hour or something.
What do you anticipate with now being on the western edge of the eye wall instead of the eastern?
Yeah, I think I'd rather have that. I think it'll be, still we're gonna see hurricane force winds. We're gonna see, I expect to lose power, but I think it just kind of is like, okay, now maybe it'll be just a little bit better. Hopefully, I think we were kind of in the same situation with Idalia where we were kind of watching, thinking, oh, this might be right at us, and then it just kind of tailed off to the east. So I think we'll get the eye wall unlike we did during Idalia, but I think we'll be um, just on the western side of it.
Fair enough. I know a lot of Florida, but just because of the magnitude of this storm, almost all of Florida is under tropical storm winds currently. All of Georgia and South Carolina under tropical storm warnings. Do you have any friends in neighboring towns, maybe friends that evacuated that have stories currently today?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. Campus is a ghost town right now.
Wow.
So what they did was basically most people went home, and then those that are on campus living in residence halls or dorms, they were sent to a conference room just to keep everyone together. And then for those living off campus, they opened up the Civic Center or the basketball arena for us if we want to go and have a place to stay just for safety. But we were able to go into the meteorology building on campus, and it's where a lot of professors and National Weather Service folks and students are hunkering down. It's a couple years old, so our faith in the building is pretty good.
I've heard it's kind of a war zone in there right now. Can you take us through it?
It's gotten kind of crazy. We've all got like food everywhere and there's, water everywhere and we're all trying to figure out what's going on. I've been walking a bunch, just trying to, keep my mind off the storm, but also pay attention to it. And, there's a good amount of people in there. So we've got a nice low spot in the studio, but there's a good amount of people in here.
Fair enough. So how, obviously the storm will be making its way onward into the Big Bend region of Florida tonight. How long does the school really anticipate closing for, and what's the timetable for students coming back?
So the university is closed through Sunday as of now. They did kind of say in some messaging to expect it to be longer than that. I would be surprised, quite frankly, if we end up in class on Monday, unless we kind of see what we did with Idalia, where we kind of get just enough of an eastward nudge to where we can avoid the worst of it. I think if we do get the worst of it or, close to it, I expect that it'll probably be a little bit of time before we return to campus. And especially because a lot of students did leave, trying to get back to campus is a concern, the infrastructure of campus, the infrastructure around campus, and making sure everyone is safe in the return. So I think I would expect it to be longer than Monday return to class, but anything's possible at this point. And maybe it'll nudge just east enough and we'll kind of avoid the worst of it.
Well, I had a question for you. So you talked about Tallahassee being susceptible to losing power. Can you kind of explain that? I mean, I know the reason, but maybe you can walk my friend here through it.
Yeah, so we have a lot of trees. We're a very nature town. We've got plenty of trees, plenty of big old trees. We've never had a major hurricane come through the towns. So these trees are very old, probably hundreds of years old, very big. And if these trees can get knocked down, or even some limbs get knocked down, all of our power ground, or not all of them, but a lot of them are above ground. So a lot of our power lines being above ground, it takes a tree to snap for the power to go out. And a lot of us have joked because we'll have power go out all of a sudden for like not even an afternoon storm, just like a gust, and the power will go out, or it'll go out for a few seconds, then kick back on. So we're definitely susceptible to power outages. I think it's kind of the expectation is that we will lose power. Um, but I know, a lot in Southwest Florida have also lost power. I think a couple 100,000 at this point. So I think it's going to be a big power restoration effort, and it's going to take a lot of time for everyone in Florida to get their power back.
Absolutely. This is just a crazy situation, and you mentioned it before. There was a situation just like this 1 year ago, Idalia, that struck Florida in basically a very similar region. How does this compare to what you guys experienced last year? And if you would like to add as well, if you were down in Florida State last year, how did it feel?
Well,
Yeah,
you
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Chandler.
Ryan. You go ahead, Ryan.
All right. So far, it's been pretty quiet. So I would kind of say the build up of it has kind of been comparable to Idalia. I would say with Idalia, I didn't notice a lot of impacts immediate to campus, but a couple days after Idalia hit, I did drive home to Orlando, and just driving through Perry, you can see road signs twisted. You can see along the interstate where trees were taken down and stuff like that. So I think overall, um, the expectation is kind of what might have happened in Perry, where Idalia made landfall, could just work its way a little closer to us, if not impact us. So we'll see what happens. But so far, it's kind of been a quiet start. I think in the next hour is when things will start to ramp up.
Fair enough. Chandler, what are your thoughts?
Well, being on the western side, that does make it a little bit similar for them to Idalia because this storm is very lopsided. Very strong winds on the east side, not as strong winds on the west side because of how fast it's moving. And so they probably will have a slow buildup to these conditions. But unlike Idalia, the center of circulation is much larger. This storm in general is much larger, so they will experience stronger impacts than they did with Idalia, and those will last a little longer too. So,
Fair enough. Ryan, we'll give you one more question. Just any thoughts of what you think might happen, or things that might happen on campus. Actually, I'll ask you this: are you currently on campus right now?
I am on campus, yes.
Fair enough. How exactly is it just you? You said it was a ghost town earlier, but is it?
Yeah.
Are you hunkering down with a couple of people? What are your plans?
Yeah, so a lot of people within the meteorology department are still here because we don't leave for hurricanes. But I think, a lot of us have gone into the building and are just kind of here to hunker down. And, I told some other people, like, I expect to be here through Sunday, through the weekend if needed. The hope is, of course, that maybe tomorrow morning we could get out of here and go home. But we definitely have enough supplies to be here without power through the weekend.
Fair enough. Ryan Cedergren, thank you so much for taking part in this interview. I know it's just a crazy situation going down in Tallahassee right now, even though you are just starting to see the brunt of the rain. My best wishes for you guys down in Tallahassee for tonight and into tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
Yep, absolutely. Chandler, we'll hear from you just after a break that we're going to have. We'll have one of our own, Allison Sousa, interviewing him. So stay tuned for a more large-scale interview with Chandler coming right up.
Welcome back. I am joined here with first year graduate student Chandler Pruitt tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here instead of in Tallahassee where I went for undergrad. So
Yeah, you went to Florida State for your bachelor's in meteorology.
yes, ma'am.
And your research now is focusing on tropical cyclones. So can you give us just a quick overview on what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm focused on basically assimilating, which is just a fancy term for dumping data, into a new hurricane model called HAFS. You've probably seen it if you've been online at all, because it's one of the models that the NHC is using for predicting track and intensity. But I'm basically trying to improve its ability to forecast cyclogenesis, which is just a fancy word for the birth of cyclones.
That's so interesting. And something that we've heard a lot tonight about Helene is the storm surge. Can you tell us why there's such a great risk for a storm surge with this storm?
Of course. So basically, the main reason why there's a big risk for storm surge is the wind field. We were talking about it earlier, but it's a very large wind field, and so with a very large wind field, you're able to scoop up more water and funnel it towards shore. And in this particular scenario, it's going towards the Big Bend. The Big Bend acts like a funnel. It's going to basically funnel in all that water into the coastline, into places like Wakulla County, Jefferson County, and Taylor County.
Thank you so much. And we've also heard that this storm has rapidly intensified. Within the last 2 hours, it jumped from a Category 3 storm to a Category 4 storm. What ingredients allowed Helene to do this?
Of course. So tropical cyclones in general, they thrive off of very warm water, and in the Gulf right now temperatures are above 88 degrees Fahrenheit, which is more than plenty as far as temperature wise for cyclones to intensify. And specifically, Helene went over what's called the Gulf Loop Current, which is basically where a current coming from the Caribbean Sea pushes this very, very warm water into the middle of the Gulf, and then the current goes through the Florida Strait between Florida and Cuba. And Helene, of course, went right over that as it went from the Yucatan to now the Big Bend. So between that and then there's also something else, which is the trough that has been digging into the southeast. Trough is just associated with cold fronts, and we had a front that stalled out over the Appalachian Mountains and over the southeast. But this trough, what it does is it enhances what's called divergence. We don't have to get into that, but what that means is it's going to remove a whole bunch of air mass above the cyclone, which allows the pressure at the center to drop. And once you see a drop in that pressure, you're going to see the winds around the eye really start to strengthen.
And so is that low pressure system, is that located, or like where in the country is that located? Is that close
Right.
to like Tennessee right now?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
basically exactly where it is. So
So it's on a collision course with that. and so-
exactly, it's going to mix and mingle with it, which is why we actually have a big flood threat up in the Carolinas and Tennessee and Georgia. So.
Okay, yeah. And then we've talked also a little bit about the experimental cone put out by the NHC. Can you tell us a little bit about how that is changing science communication, especially with regards to tropical cyclones?
Of course, yeah. So I actually did research in undergrad with a partner of mine, Robert Zott, and he and I, when we were investigating modifications for the cone of uncertainty, we found that the public really appreciates knowing more about the hazards than just the track, and they really appreciate knowing how the impacts are going to, or how the storm's going to impact people inland. And so when the NHC modified this, it was a really nice step forward, because now we get to see just how large this wind field is and how damaging the cyclone will be, not just to the people inside the cone. In fact, the cone is very small compared to this system, and so it's not really useful at all.
That's so interesting. So after this storm makes landfall in Florida, it looked like it was going to track up towards the north. Can you talk a little bit about the impacts that other parts of the country might see even after this storm becomes a post-tropical cyclone?
Of course, yeah. So we were just talking about how it's going to mingle with the cold front that's stalled out across the Appalachian Mountains. And when it does this, it's going to basically flatten out, and there's going to be a lot of precipitation brought to areas like Asheville, North Carolina, all the way down to Atlanta, Georgia, and then even over into Nashville, Tennessee. So basically that region of the country is going to see a lot of rainfall. Specifically with Asheville, they've already seen a lot of rainfall because that front stalled out. And now we're looking at rainfall totals that are going to rival their biggest flood event back in 1916. So the National Weather Service office there in that region has been reiterating all day today that people need to prepare for a lot of landslides, flash flooding, because of course there's a lot of river valleys down there, so the conditions can get bad very quickly. So they've been emphasizing that danger, and hopefully people are prepared for it and they're staying weather aware.
All right, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Of course, thank you for having me.
We'll be back in a short moment with more information on the system.
Welcome back to live coverage for Campus Weather Service tracking Hurricane Helene. I'm student meteorologist Sarah Steerley, joined with student meteorologist Allison Souza. We have a few videos to show you of how bad the storm surge actually is, and the hurricane hasn't even made landfall yet. We have one video from Madeira Beach near St. Petersburg. Credit to Big Timber on Twitter.
And you can see how far the storm surge has already impacted the coast, and like we said, the storm has not even made landfall yet. It is still in the Gulf of Mexico. And we have our second video that's going to come into us. It's from Pinellas County, which is near Clearwater Beach. This is credit to Mike Cavus, and this just shows how the sea is already starting to rush in, and there's houses there. It's rushing into people's backyards, and you can see that the wind has also already started to pick up in those areas. And now if we head down to Minnesota Beach, we have a video from there as well, and that is again just showcasing how the storm surge is again impacting people's houses. You can see it rushing in, filling what looks like to be the porch there, and it's going to continue to do so as this hurricane approaches the Big Bend.
Yeah, absolutely. So that already shows the dangers of this hurricane, and that's not even the worst of it yet. So how is this storm going to track up the Big Bend? How bad is this storm surge going to be overall as this makes landfall, if that's already the damage that's being caused?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to watch for. You're going to want to pay attention to watches and warnings issued for your area as the storm continues. It is expected to make landfall tonight. So with a few more details on the rest of the track and current status, we're going to head over to the wall with student meteorologist Gavin Sandell.
Thank you so much, Allison and Sarah. You guys did mention storm surge, tracks, warnings. I'm going to cover all of this in my forecast right here, and I'm going to be repeating a lot of what Tyler says, but I can only repeat it because a lot of this info is so important. Hurricane Helene right now tracking up the Gulf of Mexico, bearing her eye down on the Big Bend of Florida. It's currently a Category 4 hurricane, 130 miles an hour, and its minimum pressure has been going down to the floor at 942 millibars right now, and it's speeding north-northeast at 23 miles an hour. It is expected to make landfall in some area of the Big Bend in the next hour or two. So let's go on. This is the radar, so you could see just this area of reflectivity signatures. That's the eye wall, and that's the most powerful part of the hurricane. And it's not just what's going on in the eye wall, it's everything outside of it too. Almost the entire Gulf Coast of Florida, north of Tampa, and as well as east of Panama City, they're getting hammered by rain right now, and this is only the beginning. Infrared satellite also shows so much of what's going on. Those big dark reds, which means very high clouds going on, just shows the strength of the hurricane right now. Let's tell you about the track. Right now, Category 4 hurricane. It will make landfall at some area in the Big Bend later on in the next few hours. As it tracks northward, it will remain a Category 2 hurricane as it goes into Georgia, just at 105 miles an hour. But once it goes up, it'll start to get into a low pressure. It will become an extratropical cyclone and kind of stall into the Kentucky, Tennessee regions. So what does this mean really? How did it strengthen? The one big thing is water temperatures. You can't see any values here, but I'm telling you, and you could totally tell this as the truth, water temperatures are in the high 80s, low 90s, which is absolutely conducive for tropical storm formation here. That's why Helene was such a very strong strengthened for today. It started as a Category 1, Category 2 this morning with winds at about 100 miles an hour, and it's only gone more intense. This is the tropical storm force wind probability. You could see how large of a storm this is. It's encompassing almost the entire region of Florida. And look at Georgia. Georgia, you don't see too many hurricane landfalls, at least compared to Florida, but almost the entire state, entire southern border, and Atlanta as well behind me in that 100% or 90%, tropical storm force wind probability. And you could put this on paper for hurricane warnings inching its way up north into Georgia, just south of Atlanta, Macon included. Tropical storm warnings encompassing the entire state of Florida minus that western edge, entire state of Georgia, and entire state of South Carolina. So this is no joke for anybody living in these areas. This is something you absolutely need to prepare for if you haven't done so already. Wind gusts will go ahead in time. This is 11 o'clock p.m. This is when the storm is forecast to make landfall according to this model. 74 wind gusts in Lake City, Florida. Tallahassee, where we had some great people interviewed from, they're going to be seeing wind gusts 52. I wouldn't be shocked if those wind gusts were higher as well. And as it tracks north, like I mentioned, it will remain a hurricane going into Georgia, so those wind gusts will only be above hurricane force. Storm surge warnings are in effect for the entire Gulf Coast of Florida, heading up into the Big Bend as well, just because of those strong winds and just the magnitude and the size of this storm. 15 to 20 feet is the forecast for storm surge, which, like Tyler said, Ivan and Katrina have only seen higher storm surges, two very famous names. So now let's go back to the radar. It's inching up, but this doesn't just impact Florida right now. This is the entire eastern third of the country, going up to Georgia, into the Carolinas, and even we saw some clouds here in Pennsylvania today. So what does this really mean for us here in Pennsylvania? Let's go to the future weather. We're skipping to Saturday, which is when the effects really will be most concerning here in Pennsylvania. Lots of scattered storms, but still nothing to not worry about here. Saturday into Sunday, if you're going to the Penn State football game against Illinois on Saturday night, make sure to bring a rain jacket, make sure to bring a windbreaker, an umbrella, because rain showers will be abound in our area. Sunday afternoon as well, and into Monday, we'll still have that tropical feel, something that we didn't really have in the forecast a couple days ago, but as Helene has started to really become certain on where it's going to go, we're seeing some rain much more possible in Pennsylvania. So for rain totals here, going into Saturday, we're seeing 2s, 3s, 4 inches. A lot of the Appalachian Mountains, because of the wind going up and forcing rain out of the clouds, they're going to see very high rain totals, as well as when that storm stalls in Kentucky and Tennessee, they're going to see a lot of excessive floods. Let's check in here with Pennsylvania. It's Sunday at 5:30. This is about game time for Penn State football versus Illinois. We're going to see more so of a nuisance rain shower, but still something that you should not just take with a grain of salt. We're going back to Hurricane Helene right now. Just the magnitude of this storm is something to be completely worried about if you're in the coast of Florida. Evacuate if you haven't, and especially not just that coast of Florida, because there's going to be a lot of storm surge there going up and northward into Georgia. That will be the main concern for them. So Sarah and Allison, I'll throw it back to you guys.
Thanks, Gavin. Thank you for giving us all the information as Helene is expected to make landfall very soon tonight. Again, just be mindful of the storm surge. If you are under a storm surge warning, please make your plans. Be mindful of that. And even if you're not on the coast, as the storm continues to track northward and into the Appalachians and as it stalls, there's going to be quite a bit of rain dumped there. So there's going to be a lot of flooding to watch out for in those areas.
Absolutely, and flooding is not the only concern there. Isolated thunderstorms and isolated tornadoes are possible as the hurricane tracks north, and especially the Appalachian region. There already has been some rainfall in the past couple of days, so they're already under the risk for flash flooding. But as this hurricane tracks north, especially if you're near rivers or large bodies of water, flash flooding is the main concern as this hurricane tracks north into those regions in the coast, or in the East United States.
I want to thank you all for joining us tonight with our live broadcast. Please, if you're in the areas that are going to be affected by the storm, pay attention to the watches and warnings issued by the National Weather Service. Make sure to stay safe within these coming days. Have a good night.